When additional charges are incurred on a supply, the value is added to the invoice. Depending on the type of additional charge, the value is either included or excluded while calculating GST. The additional charges can be an income to the supplier and an expense to the recipient, while in other times it can be a loss to the supplier and a gain to the recipient. With Tally ERP 9, you can account for all such additional charges using separate ledgers and include or exclude the value for calculating GST. To create a ledger for additional charges, go to Accounts Info, Ledgers, Create. Create a ledger for packaging charges. Group it under Indirect Income if you are the supplier and you collect charges from the recipient of the goods, or group it under Indirect Expenses if you are the recipient and you pay these charges to the supplier. Select the option Not Applicable in the Is GST Applicable field. In case packaging charges need to be included for calculating tax, select GST in the Include in Assessable Value Calculation For field. In the Appropriate To field, select Goods to add the value to only goods in the invoice, or select Service to add the value to only services in the invoice. Select Both if you want to add the value to both goods and services in the invoice. When you select goods, you can select the method of calculation as based on value or based on quantity. For other appropriation options, the method of calculation is set to based on value by default. Now you can save the ledger. The ledger is created by selecting options that allow the value of the ledger to be included for calculating GST. When a ledger is created by selecting Not Applicable in the field Include in Assessable Value Calculation For, the value of the ledger is not added to the taxable value for calculating tax. This is shown here in the discount ledger. Similarly, you can create ledgers for different additional charges by selecting the option to include the ledger value for tax calculation or exclude it. In a sales invoice, select the Additional Charges ledger after selecting the goods or services being supplied and enter the additional charges amount. Now, when you check tax analysis, you can see that GST is calculated on the value of the goods or services as well as the additional charges. You will remember that while creating the packaging charges ledger, we had configured it to be included in the assessable value calculation. Therefore, on selecting tax ledgers, the calculated tax amount will automatically appear. You can now save the invoice. The taxable value, which includes the additional charges and the tax calculated on this amount, is captured in your returns as shown here in the GSTR1 report. Here is another invoice where an additional charges ledger discount is added to the invoice. Since the supplier is offering discount, the amount is entered in negative. If you check tax analysis, you will see that the value of the discount does not affect tax calculation. Tax is calculated on the full value of goods because the discount ledger participates in the invoice value and not in tax calculation. Now, let us look at a purchase invoice. Here, additional charges are added as an expense and included while calculating tax. You can also select multiple additional charges in an invoice. The value of those ledgers configured for tax calculation are included for calculating tax, while the others are excluded as shown in this sales invoice. Tax is accurately calculated and applied even when the invoice has a different setting for tax calculation. You just have to create the ledgers with the required settings and then select them in the invoice. The rest is taken care of by Tally ERP 9. With Tally ERP 9, you can maintain ledgers for additional charges like commission, packaging charges, trade discount, cash discount, and other discounts. You can apply additional charges in the invoice and calculate tax on additional charges.